With the passing of decades, foreign immigration became a constant characteristic of public speech and collective imagination, and it has assumed an extended range of representations and symbols, sometimes controversial, and in many cases implicit and thematized. In many aspects, the presence of immigrants became so endemic that, nowadays, it is scarcely noticed. Foreign people constitute a constant presence in the television productions. They win sport awards, they sit at a school desk, they become union representatives, they write novels and they open a butcher shop. On the contrary, in many other aspects, their presence does not seem to have acquired a fixed social statute. When talking about successful positions, being a foreign people is a marginal and secondary aspect, or it represents a useful aspect to lend an additional air of mystery and exoticism to its image. When represented in more everyday and less desirable positions, a foreign people is associated in many cases to living conditions which follow rather hackneyed clichés. In both cases, the fact that immigrants constantly appears in collective imagination of Italians doesn't imply that they are accepted as a stable and normal part of Italian population. In my dissertation, I will try to provide clear information that will be necessary in order to understand the fundamental aspects of the immigration phenomenon and its consequences on the society. First of all, it is necessary to know who immigrants are and why they have arrived in Italy, by highlighting that this phenomenon is not recent and by inquiring on migratory projects of each immigrant. Furthermore, information about how immigrants integrated in our territory will be provided, and also the attention will be concentrated on the fact that immigration is becoming more and more widespread among young people and women. From this aspect, it will be given an analysis of the migratory policies of the Italian government and their considerable changes during the decades. Obviously, there are also constant continuities that played and still playing a prominent role in defining the composition and the life conditions of foreign population and also Italian society. Starting from the Legge 943/86, the explanation will continue with the Legge Martelli, the law about citizenship, the Legge Turco-Napolitano, and the Legge Bossi-Fini. Afterwards, the analysis will be focused on the introduction of the fundamental characteristics of migratory systems that involve Italy, by showing that the beginning of those migratory systems is one of the consequences of the transformations of the Italian society, which is less mysterious and unpredictable than people think, and by showing also that Italy is not subjected to a singular kind of immigration. On the contrary, it is subjected to a large number of them, in a majority of cases very extremely different among them. It is necessary to concentrate the attention on what immigrants do and how they live in Italy. The level of scientific knowledge is still largely unsatisfactory. In our country, people always talk about immigration, but in the majority of cases they never study this phenomenon. Nevertheless, a series of investigations, researches and studies is available in order to precisely delineate at least the outlines of this description. A somewhat different description from many images that people tend to acquire as real without any particular carefulness. This analysis will be carried out by talking about employment, families, mixed marriages, education, criminal activities, and then about political and social participation of immigrants. Finally, the analysis will be focused on how people talk and on what people think about immigration in Italy. Newspapers and surveys carried out in last decades about the behaviors of Italian population about immigration will be analyzed, and it will be highlighted that in both cases there had been noticeable changes with passing of years, but also significant continuities. Also in this case, both the interpretation of mass media and the behaviors of Italians about immigration are different and less expectable than people think. My objective is to demonstrate that immigration in Italy is not a shattering emergency. It is a complex process that is entrenched in the social conditions of the country and in the transformation of the last decades. It is certainly possible to arrive to understand its dynamics, but only on two conditions. Firstly, it is necessary to consider the decennial history of immigration and also the fact that many changes that seem to be apparently fundamental, in reality they are simply crumples. Other changes that at the beginning seems to be completely unimportant, in reality they generate considerable consequences only after a few years. Secondly, it is necessary to consider the heterogeneous and elaborate aspect of immigration. It doesn't exist something that is true for all immigrants during all moments of their life, and also it is impossible to think that this kind of experience will completely define their behaviors and their identity. As in the majority of social phenomena, one of the principal results of knowing more information about immigration is the discovery of knowing less than necessary. The information contained in these pages have been written in order to give an idea of how immigration was and still being in the middle of the Italian and British informative framework. As a matter of fact, for decades this subject has always been the cause of quarrels, debates and political and social controversies. Even if the Italian population is living this condition of reception and cohabitation for many decades now, it continues to be unready and cautious toward those people which are outwardly considered as different from ourselves and from our lifestyles. In many cases, this awareness led to racist behaviors that injure the intelligent and developed image of the modern man. How is it possible that, notwithstanding the technological advances, the astonishing discoveries, and the moon and other planets landing, we still be frightened by people which have the same physical and mental characteristics than ourselves? The aspect that I notice the most is that immigration has some constant elements, even if it is always changeable according to the different geographical context and to the various decades. Protagonists change. They may be men and women, farmers or city dwellers, people by themselves, or entire families which escape from wars, persecutions, or simply from destitution. But also attraction or push factors vary, as it happens for job position of immigrants in the coming areas. Finally, the various nationalities have in many cases several migratory models, more or less stable and with a different geographical composition, and they are more or less linked to a particular activity. Nevertheless, it is possible to detect some common elements. First of all, the nature itself of the immigration experience, which is at the same time very distressing and though, but also with a redemption aspect, as the same immigrants underline. Secondly, other common elements are the attachment to the country of origin and the myth of homecoming. Thirdly, the reaction of the reception society have common elements. Obviously, they are very different among them, and they are interweaved with the nature of migratory policies, but with the systematic recurring of similar aspect towards and all. However, I am firmly convinced that an high and always increasing number of people is starting to be aware of the value that immigrants have added and still doing to the society. In my opinion, it is not easy to know, esteem and mix each one's opinions and lifestyle with others so different from ours, but I strongly believe that this is not extremely difficult at the same time.
Argelino clandestino, nigeriano clandestino, boliviano clandestino, mano negra ilegal.